Hello, thank you for joining me here today. My name is Laura, and today I am talking about the book Delicate Condition by Danielle Valentine. And for my regular viewers, you will see that I'm filming in a new location today, so let me know what you think of this background. Most of my videos will still be filmed in front of my bookshelf, but I thought it would just be fun to switch it up. But Delicate Condition is a book about a woman named Anna who is 39 years old and trying to become pregnant, and strange things are happening that lead her to believe that there is someone out there who is trying to prevent her from having a baby. And this is a psychological thriller with some horror elements. And specifically, as the book goes on, we have a lot of body horror moments. And this book was released in August of 2023 in preparation for the release of the new American Horror Story season, which premieres in September of 2023. So it will be premiering later this month. So yeah, this new season of American Horror Story is adapted from this book, Delicate Condition. And while I do not watch American Horror Story, I saw the first episode of the first season back when it came out, which was a long time ago now. And it was just too creepy and disturbing for my taste, and so I have never watched anything since. I have seen different posters though, especially we used to live in LA, and so around this time of year we would see the posters for it everywhere, and even just the posters would just freak me out, and I did not like looking at them. But yeah, even though it's not my kind of show, I still was very curious to read this book. I have a higher threshold when it comes to books versus movies and TV shows because it's different actually seeing it, And also American Horror Story just tends to have such a dark vibe, I guess, which of course it's dark. It's about horror stories. But anyway, even though I'm not planning on watching the show, I was curious to read this book, and I do enjoy books like this where it's the psychological thrillers with some horror and just really weird. And I also just love the weird horror books written by women, and especially when they're about the female experience, which of course this one is about pregnancy and being a mom. And so yeah, I just love books like that. And yeah, so this genre is just definitely up my alley when it comes to books. And so yeah, the body horror moments all deal with the pregnancy aspect. And so I would say if you are pregnant or you are trying to become pregnant, I mean, depending on, your personality, right? But I would say that you should probably wait to read this until after you're done with that phase of your life kind of a thing. Because yeah, I feel it would be pretty disturbing to read something like this while you are currently pregnant. But again, everybody has a different threshold. But also there's a very intense miscarriage scene, which is very descriptive. And I myself have not had a miscarriage, but I do have a loved one who did, and she described it to me. And so as I was listening to this section of the book, it was tough because I kept thinking of this person I love who had this happen to them. And so it was just difficult for me to read because I kept thinking of her, the person I actually know in real life. And so I would imagine if you yourself have been the one that experienced it, that it would be even harder to read a scene like that. But again, you know your own personal threshold and your own triggers. But yeah, so definitely, pregnancy and difficult with pregnancy and IVF and miscarriages, these are all the big themes of this book. And so if any of those are triggering or difficult for you to read at this time in your life, you should definitely hold off until you feel like you're ready. And then yeah, I am going to be getting into spoilers, but as far as my spoiler-free thoughts, I definitely did like this book a lot. I listened to the audiobook and I paid $35. I have never spent that much on an audiobook before, so it was definitely more expensive, but it was worth it because the narrator is fantastic. However, the reason I chose the audiobook was because lately I just haven't had as much time to sit and read, and so I knew I would be able to read it faster if I had the audio. But this would be a great one to actually get the physical copy or get it on Kindle, because there was so much I wished I could have highlighted, but I couldn't because I was listening to the audiobook. So I want to physically read this at some point so I can go through and highlight the sections that stood out. So I feel either way, whether you choose the audiobook or to physically read it, either one is a good choice because it's a fantastic audiobook, but it's almost a guarantee there's going to be so much you want to highlight. So it's also a good idea to physically read it too. But yeah, this one, it was hard to put down. I just wanted to keep listening to it. And it was very suspenseful and it kept me guessing. And there's just, like I said, just a lot of visceral body horror to it. And again, it is a thriller by a woman about the female experience and being a woman. And so I loved that aspect of it as well, which I feel I should say, I have never been pregnant and I am not currently trying to be pregnant. And so as far as the pregnancy aspect, I can't necessarily relate to that, but I could relate to just the female experience on a whole. But yeah, that deeper pregnancy level, I couldn't relate to necessarily, but I still enjoyed reading it. And I did look up the casting for this, and Emma Roberts plays Anna. And in the book, Anna is 39 years old, whereas Emma Roberts is 32. So she's definitely unfortunately like too young for the role because her age is a big part of the story. But nonetheless, I think she's well cast. And I did look up to see if she's ever been pregnant and she has, by the way. And I do think like, well, on one hand, I get being an actor, it's your job to pretend to be and pretend to experience these things that you've never experienced before and pretend to be someone you aren't. That's the whole point of the job. And yet at the same time, I think there's certain roles and certain stories that need to be told by people who actually have been in that situation or who can actually like relate. And I think it just makes for better storytelling when the people involved are just like more deeply connected to the source material, you know, and they're just like more connected to the story they're telling because of these personal things inside of them. And again, that's not to say if Emma Roberts had never been pregnant before, I'm sure she would still do an amazing job in the role, but I just think there's something about certain roles that are just something more intimate about them. I think it's better for them to be told by people who actually do have that experience in one way or another. And Kim Kardashian is also in the show. And I don't know what Emma Roberts' pregnancy was like, but I did read, you know, like back when Kim Kardashian had her first 2 kids, I remember reading how like she had really difficult pregnancies. And so I'm sure she could relate to it on that level as well. Plus, Anna is a movie star. And so her fame and people making comments about her and judgments about her who don't even know her personally and just being in the public eye is another big part of the story. So I'm sure, you know, Emma Roberts, but specifically Kim Kardashian, she's not playing Anna, but I'm sure she, you know, connected to the material for that reason as well. But yeah, with this book, along with Anna's story, we also get these little vignettes throughout from different women throughout the centuries who are going through pregnancies that are similar to Anna. And I really enjoyed these segments. And then they all like, you know, they all come full circle at the end of the book. And a big part of this book is also just like women not being taken seriously and women like being seen as hysterical and like specifically pregnant women who have all their hormones and people just kind of dismiss them. And also pregnant women who are just like wanting to know why certain things are happening and like talking about the physical pain. And in the book, it starts out because we say how like certain pregnancies are like, oh, they had a difficult pregnancy or oh, that was a complicated pregnancy. But she's saying like every pregnancy is difficult, right? Because every woman sacrifices so much and goes through so much pain. And like a child, the first thing they hear is their mother screaming when they're born into the world, essentially. And so how every pregnancy is difficult in one way or another, you know? But anyway, so like women just being dismissed by the medical community and by just other people and just women not being believed, which I will say I read like at the book club's guide to vampire slaying by Grady Hendrix last year. And that's another one where a big theme is women not being believed by the men in their lives specifically. And in that book, it was just so infuriating. And it was almost too much where it was just like, seriously, like these men really aren't going to believe them? Like, are you kidding me? And it was just so frustrating. And part of me wished Grady Hendrix had written at least one decent male character in that book. And so this one has a similar theme where the woman isn't being believed, but it wasn't as like frustrating as Southern Book Club's guide for some reason. Maybe because in Southern Book Club's guide, like it's multiple women saying these things are happening, but none of the men believe them, you know, and the men turn on them even. Whereas in this, it's different because there's certain times where something happens, but Dex, Anna's husband, is there. So when she tells someone about something, he can vouch for it because he saw it too. And so because this like stable, logical man is there to confirm and be like, yeah, that really did happen, people believe her. And so it made me think of Southern Book Club's guide, because in that scenario, there were multiple women saying like, this is what's happening. And yet it didn't matter that there were multiple of them. They were still disbelieved because they were a woman and not taken as seriously. And so in this book, there were moments where something would happen. And as I was reading, I would be like so relieved that Dex was there to confirm that this really did happen and Anna's not just crazy. And part of me was like frustrated at myself and also just at like society, because generally speaking, like even if it was 2 women, even if it was another woman with Anna confirming something happened, that still wouldn't be a guarantee that they would be taken seriously, right? But because one of them is a man, the people are more likely to believe that they're telling the truth and not just hysterical. And then she also talks about how, you know, like I said, she's 39 years old trying to become pregnant, and how because she's in the public eye, people are kind of looking down at her being like, you're 39 years old and you're trying to get pregnant. Like, you're too old. You should have tried before. Like, why did you wait so long? Like, it's your own fault if you're having issues. And just the struggle with also just like the female body, the fact that we do, you know, have a clock on our ability to have children, whereas men can wait as long as they want because their body is capable of reproducing at any age. So just like the biology biology of a woman's body, but on top of that, the judgment from society when a woman does choose to wait, you know? Which, by the way, I have a couple quotes I want to share from this website called Crime Reads. And I don't know the woman, I didn't look at her name, but she talked about reading this book, and she herself has like a similar experience to Anna, where she is older and wanting to have a baby. And so I want to share a quote from her where she talks about this, where like the age issue with wanting to be pregnant. And so she's talking about Anna and comparing it with herself. So she says, but she also finds herself dealing with just as many mysteries as I have. There's the frustration with medical professionals who seem completely unable to give you any answers without poking and prodding and doing increasingly invasive tests that seem only to drain your bank account and your hope. That's why it's apparently okay to chide and shame women for waiting to have a child until they're ready, even if that's later in life. And there's also just your own body in general, which women are raised to hate and revile until it becomes a vessel for another human. And so I will be linking to her website down below and her thoughts on delicate condition, because again, she was just very eloquent. And I'll be sharing another quote later on in my spoiler section. But yeah, so that's it for my spoiler-free thoughts. So based on what I've said, if this sounds like a book you would enjoy, you should definitely check it out and read it. And for anyone who is here later in September and you have watched American Horror Story, I am curious to see how it compares to the book. So as I get into the details of the plot, definitely comment down below and share your thoughts and share what the show changes from the book. And there's plot details I won't really be getting into here because I'm not going over every little thing in the book. So if you have any questions, comment down below and I will do my best to answer them, and we can just have a conversation about delicate condition. So I'll begin with talking about the person who is messing with Anna's online calendar. So again, Anna, like I said, she is an actress, and she just recently was in a movie that has just like blown up. And so now everybody wants to do interviews with her while she's also doing IVF. And so she has all these different things she's juggling in a crazy schedule. And so she relies on her online calendar to know when her appointments are. However, she ends up being late for appointments because her calendar says it's an hour later than it actually is. And then she also is like missing phone calls. And then because she's thinking she input the time wrong, but at one point she's looking at her online calendar and she sees the time change in real time. Someone changes it from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., which would cause her to be late and miss the appointment. And then there's also times where she has like medicine that is supposed to be refrigerated, and she could have sworn she put it in the refrigerator, but then in the morning it's left out. And so she is like, what the heck? Like, who is doing this to me? And basically we find out that a woman who works at the clinic or the hospital, her name is Cora, I believe. She is like in her mid-20s, and she has been the one who is trying to prevent Anna from getting pregnant. And the reason she is doing this is because Dex, Anna's husband, is having an affair with Cora. And he has been telling Cora like, hey, if this IVF cycle doesn't work out, then I'm going to leave Anna and I'm going to be with you instead. And Cora's in love with Dex, and so she's trying to prevent Anna's pregnancy from working. That way Dex will leave her and will be with Cora. And then also I forgot to mention, once she is like in the early stages of pregnancy, she is in bed at night and it's like pitch dark, and someone comes in from behind her and they like wrap their arm around her, and she thinks like they're like touching her belly because she's pregnant. But then when she like freaks out, the person like takes her ultrasound photo and runs off, and she finds out that that person was also Cora. But the reason she snuck into her room like wasn't necessarily related to her baby. It was actually Cora trying to sneak into bed with Dex, and because it was pitch black, she thought it was Dex in bed, not Anna, so that's why she like curled up next to her. As soon as both of them realized like, wait, who is this person? They both kind of freaked out, and then she grabbed the ultrasound photo because Dex had not told her that Anna was pregnant, and so she sees this ultrasound photo and she's like, what? Like, she's pregnant? That means Dex won't be with me anymore. And so that's why she steals the photo. But Cora does end up like being of some help though too, because near the end Anna confronts her, and so she tells her about the affair. But she also tells her that Dr. Hill, the woman in charge of this IVF clinic hospital, she has connections to like some other group, and this group will call Dr. Hill, and Dr. Hill will give them personal information on their clients. And she has heard Dr. Hill giving information about Anna. And so she's telling Anna like, you know, I was the one who was messing with your online calendar, but there is something weird going on with Dr. Hill. So, you know, there is something shady happening. And this was one aspect that I was kind of disappointed by, because Dex is acting kind of strange throughout the story, but we find out that the times he was acting strange, it was just because he was having an affair, right? So I was hoping it would be something more interesting and more surprising, but instead it's like something so generic, right? Where it's like, oh, some guy having an affair with someone 20 years younger, claiming he's going to leave his wife for her. Like, that's kind of cliche. And so I was hoping it would be something different, but yeah, that's what it ends up being. And yeah, because Dex actually isn't involved in what's happening with Dr. Hill and Anna's pregnancy, like, he is kind of lying to her, right? I mean, not kind of, he is lying to her because he is having an affair. But I thought he was going to be more directly involved in what was happening with Anna's pregnancy. But because he's not, he actually was like just as much in the dark as Anna was. And so the times when he's freaking out about what's happening to her, as I was reading, I couldn't tell if he genuinely was freaked out or if he's just gaslighting her. But in the end, we find out that he genuinely was freaked out. And so I kind of felt bad for him, because how upsetting and how distressing that would be to have your spouse going through this difficult pregnancy with and seems to be going a little crazy and she's unstable. And there's also just like legitimately scary things happening with her and her body, you know? And so just how stressful that would be for him, for her too, of course. But we have the scene where she gets the rash on her legs, and that part, it was just... I would be so freaked out if I was him and her. But in that moment, I'm just like, man, like, poor guy, right? Like, so I did kind of sympathize for him after realizing that he really didn't know what was happening with her. But Dex, so after she finds out he's been cheating on her, soon after that, she goes into labor and he is with her and she sees his wedding band that he is wearing. And in that moment, as she's like dealing with labor pains, she just gets this like animalistic anger, basically. And she ends up biting his hand and like biting off his wedding ring, because she just can't stand the fact that he's wearing that ring when he's been having an affair and like planning on leaving her, apparently. But then he's driving her to the hospital with his, messed up hand. But then on the way to the hospital, their car crashes and Dex ends up dying at the end of the story. And I did see, I believe the guy who plays Logan in Gilmore Girls is playing Dex in the TV show version of this. And so I've never seen him in anything else aside from Gilmore Girls, but I feel like he was a good casting choice for that role. And speaking of good casting, Kim Kardashian plays Siobhan Walsh, which she looks so weird in the posters for this. Like, why can't they just have her look like a normal person? Like, so that's my other problem with American Horror Stories. Sometimes they just are just so weird just for weird's sake, But anyway, I get some people like that, so I don't want to insult anyone's personal taste. I just don't know why they couldn't just make her look like a normal person. Maybe it's just for the ads. Maybe in the show she does look more normal. But anyway, Siobhan Walsh is a very famous actor. She has been, famous since long before Anna became famous. But the two of them become friends. And before she had met Siobhan in person, like, she had been craving female friendship and just that female bond, because she didn't have any sisters and her mother had passed away. And so when she meets Siobhan, they just have this instant connection. And at one point she's talking to her and she's saying how desperate she is to have a child. And Siobhan is like, okay, well, like, hypothetical question. If the devil was like, I'll give you a baby, but you need to like give me your soul, essentially, would you do it? And Anna is like, yes, without a doubt. Yes, I would do it. That is how much I want to have a baby. And then later on, so Anna gets pregnant. However, she miscarries. And so then after her miscarriage, she is talking to Siobhan on the phone and she's very emotional and upset. And Siobhan is like, what can I do? Like, what can I do to help you? And because Anna is feeling emotionally distraught, she says, like, can you get my baby back? Not thinking Siobhan can literally do that, but just, feeling upset. And so that's what she says. And then later in the evening, she like thinks she feels like fetal movement in her belly. And then she ends up calling Siobhan. And then a different person answers and they tell her that Siobhan like had an attack, which, by the way, she'd had cancer. So they think it's cancer related. And they're like, yeah, like, she's in bad shape and she's going to the hospital. And yeah, after this, like I said, she felt movement in her belly. And then later on, she goes to the doctor and it turns out she still is pregnant. And so the doctor thinks that it was vanishing twin syndrome, which is when you're pregnant with twins and one twin miscarries, but then the other stays. But thought she had twins. And so the whole thing is just kind of confusing. But nonetheless, she is pregnant still. And so she's very relieved that she is still going to have her baby. But throughout her pregnancy, it's just like very strange. And there's also just weird things happening and she doesn't know who to trust. And like, people sent her cookies, but she refuses to eat them. And she finds these weird dolls of her, like voodoo type things. And she's like, what the heck? And so she tries to get rid of them. And then she just has these like intense hallucinations and these weird cravings for like roadkill and things. And there's a part where she's like outside during the night and she's like feeding someone's pet cat. But then like it seems like she then eats the cat, but then she wakes up the next morning and she sees the cat and she's like, wait, what? Like, was that just a hallucination? Like that felt so real, but did that not even happen? And yeah, and there's just like a lot of weird hallucination scenes that go on. But after the car crash, so she's in labor, they get in the car crash, Dex dies, and then Siobhan shows up and she's with a group of women. And a lot of these women are the people that we have heard about in these different vignettes we've been getting who also had similar pregnancies. And basically, the reveal is that Siobhan is part of like this coven of witches. And when Anna asked for her baby back, Siobhan did a spell to bring Anna's baby back, but it took so much out of Siobhan that she is now like on her deathbed. However, she can continue living if Anna will allow Siobhan to be reincarnated into her baby. And Anna agrees. And so Siobhan, as we know her, dies, but she is being reborn as Anna's baby. And so then after this happens with, Siobhan and all these witches, the ambulance then comes and she gives birth to a beautiful baby girl who she knows will eventually become Siobhan, essentially. And then we flash forward 20 years and we see that she has, become part of this coven and that she is at this like meeting of women who are struggling to get pregnant. And she talks to one of them and we see that she is just basically continuing on this tradition that she is now part of. And we also find out that like the weird things going on with her pregnancy happened because of the spell that caused her baby to come back. But how people kept sending her these cookies and she loved the taste of them, but then she didn't trust anything given to her from someone where she didn't know where it came from. And she was like not trusting anybody. So she stopped eating the cookies and then those weird dolls that she was getting rid of. And she finds out that if she'd eaten those cookies, it would have helped with those upsetting symptoms she had. Same with the dolls. If she just let the dolls be, it would have helped with her symptoms. But because she kept messing with these things, because she didn't know any better, it made her symptoms just all the worse, basically. But yeah, so that is the gist of the story. There were some things I skipped over. For example, we have Dex's ex-wife, like Adelaide, and then their mutual friend, who is this other woman, like Tegan or something, I forget her name. I thought something more was gonna happen with them because it's a big thing where like Dex says that Adelaide hadn't wanted to be pregnant, and then Tegan, we find out, knows Meg, and Meg is a woman who gave Anna an ultrasound, even though she didn't work at the hospital and it was just this weird thing. And turns out Meg is part of this coven as well. And so basically I thought something more would happen with them, with like Adelaide and Tegan or whatever her name was, but then it just doesn't. And so I was kind of disappointed that that didn't lead somewhere more interesting. And then because Kim Kardashian plays Siobhan, I'm assuming they are going to increase her role because Siobhan is only in like maybe 10% of the book. Like she's in the beginning and then she pops up in the end and that's it. So she really is not in a lot at all. So I'm assuming they are going to increase her role and make her be around more. And same with Meg, like Cara Delevingne or something like that. She plays Meg, but Meg is in even less. She's in like one scene and then she's gone. So her too, I'm assuming they are going to make some changes to give her a bigger role. But another character I didn't mention was a woman named Io, and she was a surrogate in the 1980s and she had the weird pregnancy things. And then afterwards, she like does all this research to figure out like, okay, what the heck is happening? Who are these people who paid to have me be their surrogate? And why was this pregnancy so weird? And so she finds out about like these witches, but then she kind of spreads misinformation because she doesn't know the whole story and she thinks they're evil, but really they're not evil. And so she meets up with Anna and she makes Anna kind of freaked out thinking these negative things when really it wasn't as bad as Io thought. And yeah, I did like the theme of this book where we have, like woman supporting woman, right? Like this coven, they exist to help each other. And when a woman wants to have a baby, they try to help have that happen. And same with like not only women wanting to become pregnant, but also like the pains of pregnancy. And they try to, have these different spells and things in order to help that aspect as well. And so a big part of this, again, like I said, is just women being dismissed by doctors and by men and just people in general being like, oh, you should be grateful you're pregnant. You shouldn't complain. And so they are just kind of taking things into their own hands. And they're like, hey, if the medical community isn't going to help us out, we'll figure it out ourselves, And it also kind of implies like all these old wives' tales that exist around pregnancy and birth, how they exist, again, because like doctors knew so little about pregnancy and were so unhelpful that these women took it into their own hands to find out ways in order to make for a better pregnancy experience, essentially. And so yeah, at the end of the day, I did like this book and I would definitely recommend it. And I am very curious to see what the show will be like, which in their advertising, they make spiders a big part, like on the posters and things. And there is a part when Anna is talking to Siobhan and she's like, I had a dream that I gave birth to baby spiders. And Siobhan is like, well, I would help you raise those baby spiders and we would love them. And Anna is just like, wow, you know, that's true. However, my baby comes out, like, I will love it. And so, yeah, it seems like that one scene, they've just kind of taken that aspect and ran with it and made it their whole promotional, you know, thing. Which I almost forgot. I want to share one more quote from that blog, Crime Reads, where she talks about Anna and her baby, who ultimately, like I said, ends up being born like a pretty normal baby. But anyway, she says, and as I neared the end of the book, I found myself again worried it'd end with that old cliche, the one that's frustrated me during my lowest moments, that this woman had the audacity to want a child against all odds, and for that, she'd be punished by birthing Lucifer. Thankfully, though, Valentine is smarter than that. The baby comes, and there's something different about her, sure, but Anna is no spiraling Rosemary, unaware of what she's birthed and ruled by those around her. Her eyes are open. Maybe because she's just a great writer or because she's had a child herself, Valentine understands that the horror isn't in the tangible, but in the unknowing. And that's more terrifying than any demon baby I've ever seen on screen. And so the Rosemary, she's referring to Rosemary's Baby because a lot of people compare this book to that. But yeah, again, I will link to that article down below because I thought she was just very eloquent and obviously she could relate on a more personal level to this book. And that wraps it up for my thoughts on Delicate Condition. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you have not already. And I know I already said this, but share your comments down below, especially if you've seen the show. I definitely want to hear what people are saying about it. And maybe, depending on what I read, maybe I'll give the first episode a try and see what it's like, because I am curious. I'm just worried about risking it being too upsetting and giving me nightmares or something, you know? So anyway, let me know your thoughts down below. And thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, I made this other video recently where I talk about like great female focused books that have just like great female characters. So I will link to that. This book, Delicate Condition, would have been a great one to talk about in that video, but I made this video before I made that video before I read this book, so that's why it's not included. But anyway, thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.